Should we be afraid of salt? And this comes up a lot, especially in the zero carb carnivore diet, because I mean it's the main debate, like should I salt my food or not? And then there's like, should I eat raw foods because I'm losing nutrients from cooking, or do I need to eat organ meats, or organ meats necessary? But this video is going to focus on salt, and I'm going to try to summarize this first and then we'll kind of talk about it. So salting your food is not bad for you. Ingesting high amounts of salt is not necessarily bad for you. The side effects and what happens when you salt your food are what's bad for you. So if you salt your food and you eat an extra 2 pounds of meat, and then you have to drink a gallon of water because you're so thirsty, you're bloated, your electrolytes are depleted because you drank so much water, and you ate more food than your digestive system needs because you increased the palatability and you increased how good that food tastes to an unnatural point by salting it. I think if you had, this morning I had a few pieces of bone marrow, maybe 50 grams of salmon roe and 50 grams of liver. I had a very small meal, maybe it was maybe a quarter pound of food. I didn't salt my food, but if I did lightly salt my food, that wouldn't really matter because I'm only eating half a pound of food. It's not going to increase my thirst too much, but if you're eating 3-4 pounds of meat a day, it has a very large negative effect on your electrolytes when you have to hydrate that much. And another big thing about salting your food is, it depends on what you're eating. Like fish, Norwegian mackerel, salmon roe, liver, certain foods don't need salt. It tends to be like muscle meat. So something I actually didn't think I was going to say in this video, or that just came up now, is moving away from muscle meat and ruminant flesh is a good way to change your palate and appetite in regards to salting. And I guess the other big thing is salting our food is so ingrained in our culture. We do not need salt in the levels we're consuming now. Our Paleolithic ancestors got way less salt, and our Paleolithic ancestors also got way higher amounts of magnesium and potassium. And that says to me, well, we went through most of our evolution, hundreds of thousands of years without a high sodium intake, and only recently, when the Neolithic Revolution happened, did we start mining salt, did we start seeing salt used in cultures and various tribes and rituals here and there. But it's very apparent that humans do not need to supplement salt in their diet. I guess there's also the idea that when we did get salt, it was likely in the form of seafood or shellfish, and there were other nutrients that are very high in those specific foods that kind of counterbalance the sodium. So did we get a higher salt intake at periods because of seafood intake? Maybe, but that's a very different diet than adding salt to muscle meat. So in Vilhjalmur Steffenson's Fat of the Land, it's about an Arctic explorer, and he's he can pretty much only eat boiled fish and seal meat because that's all they have, and they don't have salt. And he talks a lot about how all of his crew and himself miss a normal diet of salting their food and whatever. And it takes a few months of adjusting to that diet of just meat to be okay with it. And he says, okay, I've adjusted to this diet, but I really wish I could salt my food. And 6 months in, another explorer gave him a can of salt, and he remembers salting his food and he really enjoyed the meal, but then the next day he didn't really miss the salt. So I think that that example and plenty of other examples are good reasons that salt is so ingrained in our culture, and people are so used to salting their food that we don't realize it's not actually necessary. And it's really just, I look at it as a seasoning or a luxury food. It's like adding a little bit of honey to your tea, or you enjoy the food a bit more, and there are possible negative side effects from doing it. I don't know what the negative side effects in the case of honey with tea would be, but definitely some things to think about in regards to salting your food and over consuming and drinking a lot of water. And this is really dependent on the person, because if you salt your food and you don't find yourself having to drink a lot of water, then you could be fine. You could be one of those people who could just salt your food and be fine, and it doesn't really matter. Me, I get really thirsty, I bloat like crazy, and I just don't see it as necessary. So I guess another big part of it, it depends on what degree of enjoyment you like to incorporate into your diet, and how much removing salt changes how much you enjoy your diet. And I guess to summarize this, it takes a couple days to get used to the taste of food without salt, and I guess another additional couple of weeks to get used to the electrolyte levels and you know, a lot of people say they remove salt from their diet and their energy is depleted. I'm like, well, you know, you're eating 6-7 grams of salt a day. It really depends on how much salt you're eating. Some people have no problem removing salt because they were only eating 1 gram or 2 of extra salt per day, and the people that have a hard time definitely were eating way too much salt. So I guess to summarize, you know, the only real things I wanted to say in this video were that you don't need salt, regardless of what anyone says. You do not need salt for, you know, to maintain a natural level and balance of electrolytes. And then I guess the second thing to note on was salt in itself is not inherently bad for you. It's the negative things that can happen from using too much salt, such as over-consuming food, drinking a lot of water, and imbalancing your electrolytes. So if any of those things have applied to you, let me know, guys. I don't really know if I missed anything on the topic of salt and what else I could have talked about. I mean, the difference between table salt, Himalayan salt, Celtic salt, that'd probably be an entirely different video. You know, I have a couple different videos on electrolytes. And I guess one final thing to touch on is it's a lot easier to keep your electrolytes in check when you don't salt your food, because you just eat natural foods and you let nature balance out your electrolytes. If you start eating, you know, salting your food and then you have to take supplements, magnesium, potassium, it's very difficult because we don't have access, especially because we don't have access to those wild plant foods we did in the past that have much higher mineral amounts. So before I digress too much, I guess I'll end it there. I think I touched on all of the points I wanted to. As always, thank you guys for watching.